All right, 1 second here. All right, welcome one holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 17. Again, want to welcome one holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 17. We're in verse 13. The Torah says, again, book of Leviticus chapter 17, verse 13. Torah says, Ish ish ve'ish ish mi b'nei Yisrael min hager hagar b'soichom shir yatsu tseid chaya oif asher yachel v'shafar es damoy v'kisar b'hofer. So here the Torah says that anyone of the children of Israel or any strangers that live amongst you, i.e. ger toshav, right, someone who keeps basically the Noahide laws or goes against idolatry, that a non-Jew who lives amongst Jews doesn't convert, who hunts and catches any beast or fowl or any bird that may be eaten, he shall even pour out the blood thereof and cover it with earth, or translate over here with dust, so to speak. So we spoke a few weeks back about trapping animals, right? Catching animals, not necessarily for the sake of food, right? We've spoke about hunting being forbidden for Jews, seemingly for non-Jews as well. And so we spoke about that. We spoke about the pouring out of the blood, and we're actually in the middle of the of this Kli Yakar, where the Kli Yakar had said about hunting and covering up the blood. So he wanted to say that the reason it's forbidden, right, is they shouldn't eat it, right? Because we mentioned many times in the previous verse 11, we mentioned, we're going to see it again in verse 14. I don't think we'll get there today, but we'll probably see it then there, and we'll see it again in the book of Deuteronomy, and that is that why it's forbidden to eat blood, right? What did we say before? We said before it's forbidden to eat blood because the soul is in the blood. It's like you're eating the soul of the animal, right? So eating blood, certainly for a Jew, be forbidden because it's like you're eating the soul. That's right. It's like you're eating the soul of the animal. Now, so says the Kli Yakar, and we mentioned this last week, that the whole point is you shouldn't come to eat the soul, right? You shouldn't eat the flesh with the soul, right? Because it has an effect, certainly on a Jew, right? It can cause a person, a person eats non-kosher, Jew eats non-kosher, cause them to be apathetic about Torah mitzvahs. But here the point is you don't eat the soul. You don't eat the soul of the animal. Where's the soul of the animal? In the blood. So he said that's the main reason, right? Also, where did the blood go? Right? Blood essentially went on the altar. Now, why did the blood go on the altar? The blood goes on the altar for what purpose? Atonement. Right? It goes up there for atonement. So says Kli Yakar on that, It's an atonement. And it really should have been the person. Right? People ask the question, how can it be? Isn't this cruelty to animals? Put the animal, you kill the animal, sprinkle the blood, or sometimes the animal, the entire animal, goes on the altar, let's say like a burnt offering, etc. But the reality is, it's a divine command, right? God says, take this animal. This is what you do. This is what you do with this animal. But person, we said way back, we talked about sin offerings. When a person brought a sin offering, it was for the sake of what? Sake that they sinned. They did something wrong. So they had to bring an animal. Right? It cost a lot of money, took a lot of time, right? To get there. It doesn't really matter. But what's the point? The point is that person, because they sinned, and let's say they're liable for death penalty. So that sin, or even if they weren't, but that animal's being used to be atoned for that person. That person should have been that animal. Right? So the blood goes on the altar. So he says, what's the reason? The whole purpose is because the soul is in the blood. That's the reason. Whether it's an animal or a bird or a domesticated animal, big animal, small animal, doesn't matter. But then what do we say at the end of the verse? The end of the verse says, V'shafach es damoy, you spill out the blood, v'chisau ba'af. You cover it with dirt. It says, covering up. Now, why do you cover up the blood? When you shecht an animal, when you ritually slaughter an animal, the one who does it has to cover the blood, makes one blessing for as many animals as he kills, right? You have to cover it up, right? There's a mitzvah, positive command to cover up the blood. But what's the purpose? Says the Kli Yakar. What's the purpose? Is a hecker. It's to distinguish. What's it going to distinguish between? The person shouldn't eat it. Then we know when an animal is killed and it's going to be used to atone or whatever it's going to be killed for in the temple. A lot of times, where's the blood going to go? On the altar. Very good. So now, if someone's going to kill an animal to eat it, right? A kosher animal, obviously. A person's going to kill a kosher animal to eat it. So then there's an obligation to cover up the blood. Why do you cover up the blood? What's the purpose of covering up the blood? Even if we don't have a temple today, right? Even if there's no Beis Hamikdash, the whole purpose is so you don't eat it. It's a hecker. It's to show you shouldn't eat it. Very good. Right? But what about the blood of an animal? Blood of an animal doesn't need a hecker. Doesn't need a distinction over here. Doesn't need to be revealed over here. I don't need to worry about it. Why? Because the person who sees what's going on, what's he going to see? He's going to see that the blood goes on the altar. And he's not going to forget. And he's not going to forget that the soul is in the blood. Right? Not only that, and fact is, he said he shouldn't eat. The servant should eat from the table of his master. But he says, what about blood of a bird? Blood of a bird, there's no ecker. There's no distinction. Right? There's no distinction. A lot of times birds didn't go on the altar. So I didn't need a distinction. But nonetheless, some of them have to be covered, right? The blood has to be covered. Even though doves go on the altar, nonetheless, they're only a small amount. In other words, you could tell me I can make a distinction. Well, how can I make a distinction? I can make a distinction very easily because not many birds go on the altar. So I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry. Got to cover it. Don't cover it. Right? It is part of the soul. It's not. Whatever it is, I don't have to worry. Why don't I have to worry? Because not many birds went on the altar. Very good. Then the Kli Yakar says, that's what we mentioned last week. Kli Yakar says, another pshat, another explanation. And he says the flesh, the meat of a smaller animal, domesticated animal, right? Let's say it's like a calf, whatever, smaller animal. And a bird, he says, well, what do we see about that? We don't hear anything about the flesh. All we hear about is the blood, right? That's all we've been talking about. Blood's going to go on the altar. You can't eat the blood. The soul is in the blood. Blood. What about the meat? Right? It's after the 9 days, after Tisha B'Av, we can eat meat. So what happened to the meat over here? That we don't hear about. So says the Kli Yakar, if they're lacking being trapped, and a person has to work hard to trap them, or let's say, right, either you tell me they're hard to trap, they're hard to find, right, they're hard to get to, let's say, or they're expensive, right? Let's say their meat, is expensive. So he says that is going to be more special to a person. Because why? Because if it's more special to him, it's going to cost him more. Isn't he going to be more careful not to mess it up? He's going to be more careful because he wants to make sure there's no blood. Because if there's blood, he can't eat it. Right? It'll be forbidden for him to eat. So therefore, you have to make a distinction by covering it. Right? If you're going to kill the animal for food, right? You're going to kill a kosher animal for food, you're going to cover the blood. So therefore, since it's special to him because he's going to eat it, or it's expensive, right? He's going to show a distinction over here. He's going to cover the blood. So rabbis tell us that the Gemara in Chulin says that from here we learn. Here the Torah teaches us ethics. Very good. Torah teaches us ethics. Where? How do we learn ethics over here? That a person should eat the meat unless it's right there for him. What does that mean? It means you don't have to run after it trying to chase it. Trying to trap it. And to spend, half a day, an hour, whatever, running after this thing. Well, it depends. Right? If it's a cow, well, it's not gonna be too hard to trap. Right? It's not gonna be too hard to get because cows don't move that fast. Right? You have other animals, let's say goats. Okay, goats move a little bit, but probably run after them also, not so hard. Right? Not so hard. But he says, what's important over here? Preparation. I can't just say, okay, I'm going to take this cow, good, we're going to kill it. No, you got to prepare it ahead of time. You got to acknowledge, you got to say, there's the cow I'm going to use, I'm going to check, right? I'm going to kill and eat to be prepared ahead of time. You can't just run in and say, okay, let's go, Bessie. I'm going to make burgers out of you. No, you got to prepare ahead of time. And the reason is, he says, and the reason for this whole thing is that we're going to see in Parshas Re'eh, right? We're going to get there in a few weeks. That in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 2, verse 20. Can't really see here. 1 second. I think it's verse 20. That the Torah says that God is going to widen your boundaries. It's going to say you're allowed to eat meat. You're going to see over there. Very good. What's this idea of preparation? You don't see such a thing. Right? What does the Torah tell me? Right? What does the Torah tell me over here? The Torah over here says that what Torah says, that which you're going to hunt, that which you're going to trap, whether it's a smaller animal or a bird, right? If you're going to kill it, what do? You got to cover the blood. Very good. Now here, he's telling you, okay, you're going to hunt it, you're going to find it. Now, let's analyze, be a biblical grammarian here. right? We'll analyze the text for a second. It says, let's just translate it here. It says, the Torah here says, among you that hunt and catch any beast or fowl or any bird, right? So you're going to hunt it, you're going to catch it. Now, what does that sound like? Sounds like you're going to work for it. Again, certain animals easier to trap, certain animals easier to get. Okay, right? That's not a problem. But other animals, move quicker. Going to be harder to get them. Birds for sure, right? Birds are even if in a house, not necessarily considered trapped, right? There's the whole question, the laws of Shabbos, right? Just throw this out there. If a bird came in and all the windows are shut, bird came in through, a window or came in through the front door, let's say, you shut the door behind it, the bird has nowhere to go, right? Let's say all the windows are shut. Bird can't go anywhere. So now the question is, you shut the door because it was cold. You didn't want the heat being wasted. It's cold, so you shut the door. Very good. You say, what's the bird doing there in the cold? Should be down south or in warmer weather. Okay, whatever. Bird comes in, you shut the door. But you didn't shut the door to trap the bird. Why'd you shut the door? So heat doesn't go out. Or you don't flies coming in. Whatever, you shut the door. Now what happens? Once you shut the door, the animal's trapped. The bird is trapped. But what's the obvious question? Of course it's trapped. It can't get out anywhere. There are no windows for it to get out. Great. Now, unless you know how to fly, how are you going to get this bird? Right? So since we don't know how to fly, he's got the advantage. Unless you're able to either knock it down, you get a broom, something, I don't know. Try and knock it down, without injuring it, without rendering it a trait that you wouldn't be able to eat it. But let's say you didn't have anything around you, the bird's flying around, you can't get it. So there's a halachic question. You shut the door. Normally, say an animal's trapped, if I can lunge at it one shot. A turtle, very easy. Turtle comes in, very easy to trap. Shut the door, not a problem. Grab it, trapped. Right? Other animals, they don't move so fast. Shut the door, you can pounce on them one shot. Not a problem. That's considered trapped. But if I have an animal that comes in, and let's say we use a bird, it's a good example. The bird comes in, you shut the door. Bird can't get out. Right? All the windows are shut. Now, you try and get the bird. Good luck. It's going to be hard to get this bird. Now, the halachic question is that bird considered trapped? Because normally we say, when is an animal trapped? When I pounce on it one shot. When I get it ready easily. If I can't get it easily, the question is it considered trapped or not? Right? So what would we say simple answer would be? The answer is, even if I don't have it in my hand, or I can't get at it, it's going to be very hard to get to. Doesn't matter. It's trapped. The animal's trapped. Right? So the difference between domesticated animal, not domesticated animal, right? Even let's say a dog or cat, let's say a person has a pet. They have a dog or a cat. I'm not going to get into pets. But let's say a person had a dog or a cat. Very good. You shut the door, ain't getting out. Okay, so you can say it's trapped, but it lives by you. Right? So we don't hold that it's trapped in such a case because it lives by you, goes in, goes out, whatever it is. But let's say an animal's not yours. It's not yours, walks in. You shut the door, it's trapped. So normally we would say, you have to be able to get at it. Like in one swoop. It shouldn't be that hard. That's what it means to be trapped. But the bird's trapped. Right? The bird's trapped unless like somehow you get it down. You're not going to get it. Right? So the question is, according to that, even though it's trapped technically, do we say it only gets trapped in 1 second? Right? That you have to pounce on it. That's what it means it's trapped. Or do we say the fact that it flies around, it's still trapped anyway if you can't get it? Or you say no. The fact that it's flying around doesn't mean it's trapped, but it can't get out. Right? It's catch-22. Okay. So here, very interesting thing. Here the Kli Yakar brings in something that I don't see anyone else really say. and that is this animal. This animal, the second explanation, he says the animal has to be prepared for you. Because what's he telling you? He's telling you're going to learn ethics over here. You're going to learn mussar, and that is you can't eat the flesh, you can't eat the meat, so to speak, of this animal unless it's prepared. It's got to be prepared for you, right? In other words, you got to be able to get it. You got to designate it, right? You're not just taking an animal from the streets, even if it's yours, doesn't matter. You have to designate it. Now, designation over here is an important thing. Why? Because in general, whenever I do anything, right? But there are mitzvahs that we do that there are different components. For example, on Sukkot, what does the person take? Takes his lulav, right? His palm fronds, his esrog, his lemon on steroids, I would call it, right? That bumpy yellow thing, right? You got willows, and you have what else? You have myrtle leaves. Now, all these things together make up the mitzvah of what we call the four species, arbor meaning. Now, comes the first day of the holiday, right? As long as it's not on Shabbos, 100%, these four species have to belong to you. They have to be yours. If you borrow it from someone else, now there's a Torah obligation because the Torah says lachem, has to be yours when it talks about the four species. So what does it mean it has to be yours? It means it's yours. It belongs to no one else. Now let's say you didn't have, or let's say one of your species became, you couldn't use it, right? Let's say my lulav had a split on the middle leaf, more than halfway down, or let's say by my esrog, by the top, was cut off, or let's say my willows were dried out, whatever it is, right? I can't use my own, or you didn't have your own. So what do? You say, I'll borrow from someone else. Very good. Now, this gets a little more complicated. Why? Because, again, if it doesn't apply on Shabbos, if the first day is on Shabbos, then you don't have that mitzvah belonging to you. Because if it doesn't belong to you on the rest of the days, you can still fulfill your obligation. The first day or the first 2 days outside of Israel, right? The first 2 days, it has to belong to you. Now, if you don't have one, what do? So we get around it by saying it's like you're giving someone a gift on condition that you're going to return it. It's what we call a matana al-manas lahachzir. It's a gift on condition that you are going to return it to the original owner, right? Why? Now, how does that help? Why should that help? Let's say by a child, if a child had it, or a woman had it, right? She doesn't have an obligation, but we hold there's a difference of opinion between Ashkenazic and Sephardic tradition whether she makes the blessing on a mitzvah bomb by time. By Sephardic tradition, they don't make that blessing because they're not obligated. So if they're not obligated, why should they make the blessing? Ashkenazic tradition says no. Even if they're not obligated, they can make the blessing. Very good. So if a woman acquired it, or someone not obligated in the mitzvah acquired it, and they lift it up, they don't have to lift it up that high. They just take possession of it, then it's theirs. Right? Technically speaking. So you got a problem. Got a problem. If it belongs to them, it's not yours. So normally a guy's going to take his to synagogue, he's already going to make the blessing, shouldn't be an issue. Right? That shouldn't be an issue. But the entire day, or the entire 2 days, outside of Israel, that lulav has to belong to you. So now what do? You're going to give it to your kids. You're going to give it to your spouse. Now they're going to take possession of it, but there's a problem. It has to belong to you. So once they take possession, there's an issue. So how do they get around it? They say, okay, they have to say the magic formula. And the magic formula is it's a matana manas lahachzir. I'm acquiring it, but I'm going to give it back to you. Very good. Now you ask me the $1 million question. And the $1 million question is, how in the world does that work? Why in the world should that work? Right? It's a shtick. You're telling me, oh, I own it for a second. I own it to fulfill the mitzvah, but really it's not mine. So for them, it doesn't have to belong to them. Okay. But to the original person, it does. So now you're going to tell me we got a little bit of mental gymnastics over here. He's going to say, you have to say the magic formula. You say, I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to fulfill my obligation, but it really belongs to you. Yeah. Very good question. How's that work? Because right now, for this amount of time, it's not yours. The other person acquires it. But there's such a din, there's such a law that you can acquire something for a small amount of time if you make a condition. Now, not all conditions, not necessarily all conditions work. We're not necessarily going to go into that. It's a lot more complicated. But in such a case, if a person would make that statement, then really it's not theirs. Right? In other words, they're saying, I'm going to use it for the sake of the mitzvah. But essentially, it doesn't belong to me. And I'm going to give it back to you so you don't lose. Nobody loses it. Right? Just an interesting side point. But here what does the Kli Yakar say? Kli Yakar says the whole point of eating meat over here is that animal's got to be ready for you. It's got to be prepared. Don't we have to prepare every mitzvah? A woman lights Shabbos candles before Shabbos. Doesn't she have to prepare the candles first? Or let's say better, the husband should really, if they're married, person's married, he should really prepare the candles. He should really light the candles and then, blow them out. Why? So it's easier to light. So you get the part of the mitzvah. Well, let's say a woman lights the candles, right? She's the essence of the house. She lights the candles. Very good. She lights the candles. Don't you have to designate those candles first? You can say, okay, I'll just take the candles, I'll put them in. Very good. But essentially, you're designating these candles for this mitzvah. Now, what happens if a candle goes out or it's no good? So use another one, okay. Right? But there's such a thing as preparation. And this is a far-reaching law over here. Right? You take any holiday, right? We're getting, got about 2 weeks and change before we get to the new month of El. Right? El is the month before Rosh Hashanah. So every holiday, you get a whole month to prepare yourself for Rosh Hashanah. Right? For Day of Judgment. To get a whole month. Then you get the 10 days of repentance. Let's start with Rosh Hashanah. And what's the end of the 10 days of repentance? Yom Kippur. Right? So it's a preparation. Now, if a person, so you have the whole month to prepare. Whole month of El to prepare. Some people prepare more, some less, maybe some very little. But if you don't prepare before any holiday or any mitzvah that you do, you get credit some level. You get some credit. Kaufman would say maybe get a C-. Okay. But you get credits. You get some level of credit. Okay. But you can't run into a holiday or any mitzvah by running into it. Prayer, we say that you got to prepare ahead of time. You can't just run in. If let's say a prayer service starts, 6 o'clock. You can't run in at 5:59. Right? You got to get there a little bit ahead of time. Gather your thoughts, clear your mind. Not going to be so easy, but clear your mind. You're going to stand in front of the King of Kings. Takes preparation. Now, if you don't prepare, you get something, you get something. But someone will say, well, let me repent. Right? Let's say on that holiday, you didn't prepare. Right? The holiday's over. You say, oh, let me repent. Let me do it better. No. There's a special heavenly influence of every holiday, of every fasting. Special heavenly influence. If you don't take as much as you can out of it, you don't get it back. Repentance doesn't help. You got to wait till the next year. You got to wait for the next El to prepare. You don't get that month back. You don't get it back. So every holiday needs preparation. Can't run into a holiday. Right? Can't run into prayer. Can't run into mitzvah. You got to prepare. Now, the righteous ones, the Gemara in Brachos says, when it came to prayer, they would prepare for an hour before. They would prepare an hour before, and they would, after the prayers, it would take them an hour to come back to this one. Obviously, people are going to say, come on, I don't have that much time. I have to go to work, or this and that. Very good. I'm not going to take an hour. For sure not. At least take a few minutes. You're going to stand in front of the king. You expect to run into prayer and then expect your prayers to get answered? I don't think so. It's not the way it works. You got to work hard. Prayer is something you got to work hard at. Right? Prayer is something that always needs to be strengthened. The Gemara says. It's hard. You're just saying the same prayers over again. Person feels maybe they're praying to a wall. Okay. Yeah, I've heard people say less prayers in the morning, so you have more intense. Very good. But, my answer always is, and some people like it, some people don't. My answer always is that, a lot of the prayers were written by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, right? The men of the Great Assembly. Now, the men of the Great Assembly, some of the men of the Great Assembly were prophets. They actually had prophets in there also. So I would say, again, it's my opinion, you can take it for what it's worth. I would say if a prophet is telling you which prayers to say and when you have to say them, I don't care when the prophet existed. Yeah. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, more, doesn't really matter. If a prophet tells you to do something, that's what you do. Don't you think a prophet knows better than you? So I've heard people say, but I want to say my own prayers. No one says you cannot say your own prayers. You're allowed to say your own prayers, but there's fixed prayer. Because if a person would only say their own prayers, right, what would we say? That a person is going to say it certain times. If a person, I would think sometimes, I'm not going to say all the time, or what the percentage is, but sometimes I guarantee people don't feel like praying, right? All you men out there, you're going to pray 3 times a day, right? Sometimes feel like praying more. Sometimes we feel like praying less, whatever it is. And God says, shut up, I want you to pray. You got to pray anyway. You got to work hard. Very good. Not so easy, right? So some people would say, so just say your own prayers. You should be allowed to say your own prayers. You want? But if you would only say prayers, you didn't have a fixed time. You didn't have fixed prayers. When would a person pray? Maybe when they're in dire straits. That's the only time they would pray. Right? Or maybe once in a blue moon, they're ecstatic, a monumental occasion, whatever it may be. They pray, they give thanks to God then. But they're not going to pray 3 times a day. And what does prayer correspond to? Right? Some say the patriarchs, Avraham, Isaac, Yaakov. Some say it was to the sacrifice that were given. Whatever, a lot of different potential explanations. But prayer is something that's very powerful, extremely powerful. I mentioned last time Pirkei Avos that parts of that funnel we just read. Moses prays 515 prayers. The whole question: how is he allowed to pray at all? Why should he pray? God said you're not going into the land. So how's prayer going to help? It's God's mercy. We can overcome bad decrees through prayer. That's the power. The commentaries say that when Moses prayed, I'll get there one day when I'm like 102, right? We'll get there. But Moses prayed 515 different prayers. He didn't pray the same thing. They're all different. So even the Gemara says, if there's a knife against a person's throat or against their neck, let's say better, God can still have mercy. 100% God can still have mercy. But prayer needs something to be, it needs to be strengthened. Right? I've heard people say, everything going on in Israel since October 7th. Someone says, well, I don't live in Israel. The only thing I can do is pray. Prayer is powerful. Things can happen overnight through prayer. We may not see it. We don't see where our prayers go. We don't see how things are affected. But prayer and learning Torah have real power. Jewish people today would not exist if it wasn't for both. if you didn't have prayer or Torah, right, or learning. I mean, the only reason Jewish people are still in Israel today, even though we're in exile for 2,000 years, we're not going to get into politics, right? But the only reason we're here, you got 22 Arab states want to rip us to shreds. Yeah, God forbid. What's the only thing stopping us? Ain't the army. Ain't the Israeli army. You need a standing army, right? That I would agree. But it's not the army. What is keeping the Jewish people together is Torah. It's people learning. In the time of King David, right? You had people learning. You had people actually on the front. I heard somebody say that, maybe we should go back to that. You should have yeshiva guys in the front, obviously being protected, but they're learning to protect. That's where the protection is. We need both. And anyone who says, that's not the case, it's heresy. You need both. Now, there are times everyone has to go to fight. You don't have a choice. Okay. Yeah. But at the end of the day, without the protection of Torah, Israel doesn't have a chance. No chance. I'm not saying a small chance. No chance. And Israel shouldn't exist. Based on all the previous wars, are miraculous. No question. A few months back, 300 missiles and drones. See what God forbid this next batch is going to look like. Yeah, but you had two systems working together, never had worked together before. They knocked them all out. Now the odds of that are zero. It's not like 1 in a billion. It's zero. You're gonna tell me you're gonna knock them all out? That's what's protecting us, not the army. And even they themselves said, and others said, okay, maybe knock out half of them, maybe a third. They were hoping for a third. Imagine 200 missiles, what they could have done in drones, what the damage could have been. They were hoping they knock out 100. They knocked out 300. 300 out of 300. It's pretty miraculous, right? The odds of that, I mean, having two systems work together is zero, right? Even less than zero. Anyway, I'm not going to get into politics, but that's what's keeping the Jewish people here. And even though there's a medrash in Tehillim that says we're not going to be here, when Messiah comes, we're going to be in the desert. Question is if you take that literally or not, right? But, if you had a left-wing government, they'd definitely sell everything out, make it indefensible. We get thrown out. It's definitely possible. I mean, I would say it's less likely, but, that's definitely possible. But even so, the power of prayer in Torah, right? There's nothing more important than Torah. Sometimes you got to close your book, certain mitzvahs to do. But you need both. If you didn't have Torah learning and you didn't have prayer, that's it. We're finished. According to nature. According to nature. But Jewish people don't live according to nature, but that doesn't matter. We see that. And we got a formidable opponent, much stronger than Hamas will be. They have 150,000 missiles. Get it anywhere. You can't get to them. They're like well underground. That's a much more formidable opponent. See what it's going to be. But, at the end of the day, there's only one thing. There's only one thing that stops it. It's the fact that Torah protects. Prayer protects. Right? I mentioned the story by Nachshon Waxman, was a soldier who'd been taken captive more than 20 years ago. And everyone was saying Tehillim Psalms across, night and day and night. They found out where he was. They went in to save him. Explosives didn't work. Bullets flying all over the place. They killed all the terrorists. And he was killed. So they asked the father, only an Israeli could ask this question. They asked the father, what happened to all the Tehillim? What happened to all the prayers? Now, what would have been a normal answer? Normal answer would have been, he said, God said no. That's what we would have expected him to say. But he didn't say that. He said everybody was part of this group. that came to save my son. They said none of them should be alive. There were grenades going off, bullets flying all over the place. They all should have been dead, or a lot of them should have been dead. So he answered, those prayers went to them. Those prayers, those Tehillim saved them. Just didn't happen for my son. It's a big difference. That's the power of prayer. So no one in their right mind should think, all I can do is pray. Think about it. Read the book of Psalms. Anyone's got such a shallow perspective of what prayer is. Read the book of Psalms, right? You look at what King David says. We think we have it hard. Look what he went through. He didn't have one day, menuchas nefesh. They're going to sit back, and sip pina coladas, right? He's busy fighting for his life. His sons come out against him, right? Father-in-law trying to kill him. He's running all the time, right? He's got no rest. He's got absolutely no rest. And, you read every verse, praising God. He's saying, I don't have anything without you. Even though I don't deserve to be saved, you're going to have compassion on me. And he never complains. You don't hear him complain with everything he has to go through. Very good. Power of belief, what he went through. Yeah, a person reads it, you're comforted. You can say, wow, I thought I had it hard. Right? See what he's going through. I'm not saying we don't have it hard. Plenty of people have it hard. But it's comforting. You just take someone like King David himself. Right? It's a precedent here. Everyone agrees. All these prayers are all divine inspiration, right? Form of prophecy, no question. Look at the power of it. But it's one thing we learn more than anything else. And this is what God wants to prove specifically, in the generation before the Messiah comes. What does he want to show? He wants to show beyond the shadow of a doubt there's no one to rely on except for him. Can't rely on man. Can't rely on Congress people. We can't rely on presidents, this, that. Can't rely on anybody. Where do we see that in recent history? The Holocaust. People ask the question, why did God kill 6 million people? Well, it takes a lot of people to kill 6 million people. You have the Poles, you have the Latvians, you have the Germans, you have the Russians, you have the Ukrainians, the Hungarians, a lot of people. All right, that's not the question. Say, where was man? Where was mankind? Who were the first people to join the Third Reich? Who were the first people? Academics. They were the first people, academics, doctors, not the skinheads of today. Yeah, see what's going on in college, university, no different. No different than, academics. From the river to the sea. Isn't that genocide? Isn't that calling for genocide? I think it's funny. I told someone last week, I said, all these people claiming the river, from the river to the sea, they don't know which river or which sea. They don't know anything. But they're claiming genocide. Yeah. That's where it starts, by the intellectuals. Nothing's changed in 40 years, 50 years more. Right, since the Holocaust. It's been there, it's been brewing for a long time. But again, not going to get into politics here. Right? But the idea is, we're, yes, humanitarian people tried to hide Jews, this, that, whatever. The vast majority, same Jews deserve to die. In a cruel way. There were some people who survived. They go back home. And the Jews said, listen, if you don't get out of here, we're going to kill you ourselves. Took over their property, other things. Pretty incredible. Right? So whatever common sense. Not a question about common sense. They believe that Jews should die. Be annihilated. I want to say Hitler, Yamash Shemoy, Vizichro, his name be blotted out, may rot. It's a great orator, great speaker, this, that, but they believed it. Everything got blamed on us. We always get blamed. So there's one thing we learned beyond the shadow of a doubt. Your back's against the wall. It's not man. You got to put your best foot forward, okay? You got to try. Whatever it is, you got to put your best foot forward. Good. But the reality is, putting your best foot forward, not a guarantee for nothing. As we always say, still have to do it. But you learn a monumental lesson. And this is the point. The monumental lesson is I don't rely on anybody except for God. He's the boss. He's the big boss. He's the one calling the shots. Not me, not anyone else. Right? So we learn from here, you don't rely on anybody. Anybody. Now, that doesn't mean you don't put your best foot forward. You have to. Right? We certainly have to. It's not a guarantee. But we see from there. We see from there that, America didn't want to get involved. Right? Everyone knows a little bit about history. They had no interest in getting involved. Against a major world power. Or, almost the world power at that time. What dragged them in? They got hit at Pearl Harbor. They got dragged in. They had no choice. They knew what's going on. Turned boats away. Weren't interested in people coming. Sent them back to Europe to die. All these people went, all these rabbis went to Washington telling Roosevelt this is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Didn't budge. Didn't want to get involved. Now you could say, come on. Didn't want to be dragged into the war and this. Okay. But Jewish blood's cheap. Very, very cheap. And what people have to understand is nobody cares. No matter how many times you say over the facts, nobody cares. It's an unbelievable thing. America went into Iraq. They killed tens of thousands of civilians. Anyone say anything? Anything? Nothing. Everything was about weapons of mass destruction. They never found them. But people say, isn't it better Saddam Hussein's no longer in the world? Okay. They justified it. Nobody said it. No one blinked an eyelash. Syria goes in, kills its own people, 600,000 people, gas them. You don't see people burning down Syrian flags. People marching all over the place on the river to the sea. We're going to wipe out Syria. Forget about Syria. Anyone really care about Syria? Nobody. Israel's doing its best not to kill civilians or whatever, getting slaughtered for it. The numbers are so radically small, it's unbelievable, but Israel's different. Israel's held to a different standard. I mean, that makes sense. So what's the bottom line here? Says the Kliyakar, back to the Kliyakar here. What's the bottom line? You need preparation. Any mitzvah you do, you need preparation. You got to think. Person makes a blessing. Right? You make a blessing over an apple, right? Grows from a tree. Very good. When you say God's name and you say it's King of the world, you got to know where the blessing's going. And what happens if you thought the wrong blessing, but you end up saying the right blessing? You fulfill your obligation. So you're going to say, okay, Kaufman would say you get a C minus because you're really going to think of where the blessing's going at the beginning, but you didn't. You made a mistake, but you came out with the right blessing. Good. But you got to know where it's going. When you say God's name, you got to know where it's going. Right? It's not a joke over here. Right? Not a question necessarily taking God's name in vain if you made a mistake or whatever, maybe. Right? But when you do something, you do it. You think about what you did or what you're going to do. Yeah, you really thought this peach you were eating was a carrot? And the blessing over carrots to pray Priyadama? Really? You really made that mistake? How could you make that mistake? And you mentioned God's name to boot? So you say, a lot of times we don't think about what we do. We're just doing things on autopilot and all this. Yeah, when you do things by rote, it's akin to spiritual death. That's not what we should be doing. You got to think. You got to think before I do anything. Don't think we're just too busy chasing our tails. We don't think. We just do. Right? A lot of times, I would say, what's 97% of the game to know what to do? Because most people today don't know what to do. They have no clue what to do. The other 3% is now I have to go out and do it. And a lot of times the person's going to say, my mind knows what to do, right? But I get carried away. Evacuation comes, this comes, distractions, whatever. God's like, I don't really care. I want you to do X. So a lot of times we could say there's a mind to heart, as we would say in Boston, Taha disconnects. There's a disconnect. So really, you know what to do, right? Let's say a person learned what to do. Good. So why don't you do it? And why don't you do it at a higher level? You can say, come on, I'm busy, I'm this, I'm that. I try. Okay. That's what God wants. That's exactly what God wants to see. You try. That you're making an effort. But are you making the same effort every year? Is it staying the same? When you get to Yom Kippur, right? Let's think about Yom Kippur for a second. When you get to Yom Kippur and you come to those prayers, those al-chaitz, right? Al-chaitz she'atanu lifanecha, right? I sinned in front of you for whatever the sin is. Are we still banging our chest for things we did last year and the year before? Or, thank God we did other things wrong. So we're not banging our chest for the same thing. So that's huge. That means it's spiritual growth. But if a person's doing the same thing year in and year out, and we're not going to change, and we're not interested in changing whatever, we just go through the motions, that's a big problem. That's a huge problem. Right? So, Elul's a hard thing. 10 days of repentance are hard. Rosh Hashanah is hard. Because the person knows in the back of their mind, whatever they're going to take on, potentially, they're not going to keep. They're not going to be able to keep. So people say, whatever you're going to take on, cut it in half and then cut it again in half. Cut it in a quarter. Make it something you're able to do. Even if it's taking a baby step, doesn't matter. One of the Torah giants of the last generation, what did he take on in Rosh Hashanah? Right? One of the things to take on. Every time makes an after bless, he's going to say it within a prayer book, within a bench. Torah giant, that's what they make. Right? Little things can have a huge effect. But the most important thing is you have to be consistent. When you're doing things, you're consistent. But you have to want it. You have to want to change. You have to want to admit we do things wrong. You have to want to figure out how not to do it. And that's not such an easy thing. So I would say, first figure out what you're doing wrong. Figure out why you're doing it. And then figure out what triggers it and how to try and stop it. Right? There are 3 steps. I mean, they're not easy steps. Right? Well, first you got to acknowledge you're doing something wrong. So that might be easier to do. But then you got to acknowledge, or at least figure out why you're so interested in doing it. What's the catalyst? What brings you to do it? And then you got to figure out how not to do it and how to stop the trigger. Because a lot of times, many, many times, something happens. What do? We don't take a step back. We react. Whatever comes off the top of my head, whatever comes out of my mouth, person reacts. They don't think. Yeah. And it could be, let's say, person didn't get a lot of sleep the day before. They're overtired, they're groggy, they're this. And they'll say things they didn't necessarily mean to say. But they weren't thinking. Other things going on. And things come out. Even something they may never have said or never have wanted to say. Right? But what happened? Why did it come out? Right? Why essentially did it come out? So it came out very simple. It came out because they're not thinking. When a person doesn't think, they say what they want. Now, someone could get away with it and say, if they offend someone, they can say, nah, I was just kidding, right? Or they could say, yeah, I did say it, but you're oversensitive. And even if you are, doesn't give them the right to say it. Yeah, that's how you got to deal with it, right? Anyone ever hear anyone say that? Yeah, I said it. Okay, deal with it. Come on, you're a big boy. You're a big girl. Deal with it. You don't like it? That's the way it is. That's the way it is. Some people like that. But at the end of the day, we don't think before we act. A lot of times. Something happens. What's the first thing? React. Sometimes the best thing to do is not to react. Depends what it is, right? It can be very hard. Someone caused you damage. What's the first thing you want to do? Yell, scream, this and that. So I'll tell you what the Book of Leviticus says. It's unbelievable. He says, someone caused you damage, you should run up to them and hug them and say, I want to thank you for working on my character trait of anger. What do you mean? You just ran a stop sign, right? You ran a red light, you just hit my car. Yeah, you just damaged my car. Okay, maybe not major, this, that. It didn't cause me necessarily any physical damage. Well, what happened? You were careless. So what's the first thing? You saw the corner of your eye, person had their face in the phone. They were texting, bam. Probably happens all the time. Yeah. They were texting, and that's what happened. So before you have a chance to say anything, they hit you. So now, what's your reaction? What's your obvious reaction? You're rip roaring mad. First of all, you're shaking up because they just hit your car, but you're rip roaring mad because the person's careless, could have caused serious problems. Now imagine if a person got laid up in the hospital and they're in pain and this and that. This person was negligent. Says the Holy Bible, God just using them like a stick. They're liable for any damage they cause, no question. And they have free will. God's got, we say, God has a lot of messengers. Very good. Got to look at that person like the stick. Why yelling at the stick? It's like a person hits a dog with a stick. Who's the dog go after? The stick. Dog doesn't know any better, right? No offense to any dog lovers out there, right? Dogs don't know any better. I don't think they've gotten any smarter over the years, right? Definitely don't think. I don't think they've got smarter over the years, right? But what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line over here? Bottom line is we get carried away with things. Even though the person caused damage, the Chosvova says, right in chapter Tachon, the gate of belief in God, faith and belief in God. And he says it's a great opportunity to work on anger. It's a great opportunity to work on other things. Why are you getting upset at this person, even if they're guilty? Who's the one that caused the person to do it in the end, even though they had free will? God did. Right? So you got to look up to heaven and say, okay, obviously I deserve this. This person just a conduit to do it. Very good. But that's it. It happened to me for a reason. There was to, give a wake-up call because the person, God wants to wake you up. What will he do? He'll make something happen around where you live. Right? Or let's say not where you live. Even better. Something happens in the world. Catastrophe somewhere, I don't know. Quote unquote natural disaster happens somewhere. Very good. Or not so good. Yeah, what happens? The person will say, it doesn't affect it. Okay. Now, if that doesn't work to arouse the person to tshuva, to repentance, and God says, okay, you didn't get the message, you didn't wake up, guess what? I'm now going to hit you in the pocket. I'm going to cause you financial loss. Now, if that doesn't work, what does God do? God hits you in the body. 3 steps. 3 steps. Now, what would be the obvious question? Obvious question would be, why doesn't God just hit you in the body first? That'll wake you up. You imagine one day, I had this a number of years ago, very strange. One day, I barely moved my arm. One of my arms. I was like, wow, so that must have been the way I slept, this and that. And wasn't getting any better. So I went to a chiropractor. People say chiropractor, yes, no, this, that. I went to a chiropractor. Yeah. And whatever. Took a look at things and says, oh, you got, certain things with your back, whatever. The first time I went to him, 80% of it was gone. I had to keep going back for a while, but anyway, but that came out of the blue. Literally out of the blue. Wasn't like I slept funny, I did something, abnormal, whatever. So yeah, that would be the easy way. But God doesn't want to hit you in the body if he doesn't have to. So God will do something outside, make you think. If that doesn't work, he'll hit you in the pocket. If that doesn't work, then he'll hit you in the body. But he doesn't want to hit you in the body directly. He's got patience, right? He's got a lot of patience. He wants you to repent. He wants you to work hard. He wants you to get the message. And a lot of times we don't get the message. Or we say, no, it doesn't apply to me, or, whatever, whatever it may be. So we're in this world. This world is a world of preparation. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, 2b to 3a, right, talks about God going to all the nations, asking if they want the Torah. All the nations reject the Torah. God comes to Jewish people, says, you want the Torah? They say, sure. They say, not seven Ishmael. We will do, and then we'll hear what the Torah is. Right? We're going to do it no matter what. Right? And you'll tell us what it is. But if you don't prepare in this world, the Gemara says, you don't prepare Erev Shabbos, you don't eat on Shabbos, right? So you take that literally and say, well, if I don't prepare any food on Shabbos, I ain't going to eat anything on Shabbos. Good. Right? But it's a metaphor for the next world. Person doesn't prepare in this world, what are you going to have in the next world? Not this all. I've heard people say, I'll have a small portion. No, you won't get anything. God will give you everything in this world, right? For whatever mitzvah you did. He'll give you the benefit of that mitzvah in this world, and he'll knock you out in the next world. What does he need you for? You don't keep Shabbos, you don't keep kosher, you don't do any of these things. Whatever level, doesn't matter. Person knew something, didn't know something, it's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant, right? For most things. So not a question, I'll have a less portion. No. Who says in the world you're going to get there? Right? Doesn't the Mishnah Paragraph will say at the beginning of every chapter, it says, every Jew's got a portion of the world to come. Very good. But someone says, I have a smaller portion. Well, did you ever read the last chapter in Sanhedrin on the topic? Dora Midbar, generation of the flood. They never portion of the world to come. Yeah. All these wicked kings didn't have portion of the world to come. Right? So that question, you get a smaller portion. Who says you're going to get there? Getting there is already something. Even if you don't have such a great position, right? At least you're there. You're not obliterated, right? It's the old Boston Garden, as we would say. There were people that had obstructed view seats. They couldn't see that. I would find a wall like this, like that, whatever. But someone would say, like, why would you do that? Why would you pay money for that? So what? I could be at home watching it on TV. True. But here I'm at the game. At least I'm at the game. Right? I might not be. I might not have the best seats, but at least I'm there, right? So that's another question. Would you rather, be there, not be able to see much, not be able to do much, but at least you're there, but don't be there? Well, if you're not there, you get obliterated. Your soul will get obliterated, but that's not by most people. In any case, you've got to prepare. That's what this world's all about. I got to think what I'm doing. I got to think what I'm doing at all times. It's not so easy. Because even if we know what the right thing to do is doing, it's another thing. There's a disconnect. There's always a disconnect from the mind to the heart, right? And that disconnect can be tremendously problematic, right? Because even if a person knows what to do, isn't it easy to get distracted? It's easy to get distracted. That's what God wants. We can complain after 120 years, you wanted me to learn Torah, I got distracted. Very good. You made a distracting world. So God was like, I didn't make a distracting world. You guys, I let you make a distracting world. You guys did it. Very good. Didn't stop them. So if you live in that distracted world, God says, I tell you to tap into it. You tapped into it yourself, your choice. You got carried away. I didn't tell you to do that. So we only have ourselves to blame. Yeah, question. Somebody asks or mentions Jewish people as a whole are still in the desert. Some crossing the Jordan, others, most of them are fallen. Yeah, you have a lot of Jews today, especially here in Israel, don't know nothing. They don't know nothing about nothing. That's true. Right, that's true. We're going through right now, or have gone through the last 100 years or more, is more or less, I would say, like a cleansing process. right? And that cleansing process is that either going to look like me, like an Orthodox Jew, he'll disappear, right? That's what's happened. Get 60, 70% into marriage, different places, some places higher. It's a disaster, right? So you got, biggest gay and lesbian community in the world is in Tel Aviv right now. So that's certainly not good for the Jewish people, right? No question. So, at the end of the day, we're our own worst enemy, right? That is, that is true. So we do see, how low people are, as someone here points out, but also got to learn to be more helpful, think higher of others, than others. Okay. We have a greater obligation. Anyone who comes close to Torah mitzvahs has a much greater obligation than someone who, God forbid, grew up as a potato farmer or grew up in Idaho, right? No offense. Anyone's a potato farmer, grew up in Idaho, grew up knowing nothing, right? They grew up knowing absolutely zero about Torah mitzvahs. What does God expect of them? What does he expect of them? Yeah. Listen, they don't get a free pass. There are certain things, yeah, even if they do it, they're going to be liable whether they know what they're doing or not. That's not really the point, but God holds those that are closer to him in much higher esteem. Right? Famous Korban Aaron, we've quoted many times. Korban Aaron says, by the death of Nadav and Avihu. By the death of Nadav and Avihu, they were very close to the king. And they got so close to the king, minor infraction at their level, God took them. Right? He took their lives. Now, if they were like water carriers, water boys, if they were, I don't know, mail carriers, whatever it may be. Okay, so, the president will have one of his lackeys take care of them, and that's it. Very good. Very good. But if you're second in command to the king, even to do something minor, the king can say, this is how you serve me? This is what you do? You'll go a lot better without a head, right? So the closer you are to the king, what happens? You can get burnt. Now, a person will say it's not fair. I changed my life. I worked hard. I did this. I did that. Gave up family, friends, and everything else. Why should I be tossed around? Because now God looks at you totally different, right? The way God's going to look at you, is someone now who knows what they're doing, who has a connection. So once you have a connection, it's a different issue, right? It's not going to be the same. Not going to be the same type of relationship. Shouldn't be. Because you know a lot more. More is expected of you. You're held to a higher standard. Once a person's held to a higher standard, totally different thing. Totally different thing. Right? And, again, we gave a parable. President and vice president, let's say. Right? Someone else, okay, they have to be dealt with. Very good. In this case, you're second in command. You can't make mistakes. Especially not egregious mistakes. Maybe a minor thing here or there, maybe. Use a sports parable. Anything, let's say, a team goes south. They're not doing well, whatever. Who gets fired? The manager. Sometimes, presidents get fired and vice presidents get fired, but who's really the fall guy? It's the manager. The manager's got an obligation to, motivate the players and this and that. But what if the players don't play up to their capability? Yeah. You have these great players, they don't play up to their capability. Right? It's not, what can the manager do? Tries to light a fire under them, trying to get them to perform at their level, and they don't. Right? That's his fault. He gets blamed. Right? Even if it's not his fault, he gets blamed. Right? So in other words, similar thing. The person who's in a position that's close to the king, you mess up, you'll get burnt. You 100% will get burnt. You'll pay the price. Now, there's no obvious question in that. So a friend of mine once said, isn't it better if I don't know very much? If I don't know very much, God won't hold it against me. But if you have greater potential, He will hold it against you. It's famous medrash. Famous medrash brought down many times. Medrash says that fisherman dies. So what's the first thing God's going to ask? One or two questions. Did you learn Torah? And were you honest in business, right? The whole question, which questions first, right? But let's say God asks, did you learn Torah? Fisherman says, what do you mean learn Torah? You didn't give me a brain to learn Torah. They said, I didn't give you a brain? They said, what'd you do? How'd you make parnasa? How'd you make a living? So I was a fisherman. Okay, tell me what you did. Tell me how you did it. Said I made this intricate nets and I went to these places and got up early and blah, blah, blah. And, that's how I was able to trap fish. So God says, I bet the same God who gave you brains to trap fish probably gave you brains to learn Torah also. Ooh, what a smack. What a smack upside the head. He's like, you idiot. If I gave you brains for this, I probably gave you brains to learn Torah also. That's like getting hit right here, right between the eyes. You're going to say I didn't have brains? Get brains for this? How come you not brains for that? Can't make excuses. Right? So if we have greater potential, we're not going to get judged right now because of it. But essentially, right, whatever's going to be in the end, we'll get judged. How come you didn't do this or do that or do the other thing? You 100% will get judged. It's the way it works. So a person can't say, well, I didn't know, or this, or whatever. You get no excuses. No excuses whatsoever. You didn't reach whatever potential. But the only good thing is you're only judged according to what your potential is right now. Not past, present, or future, right? Not past or future, let's say. Only right now. Where do we learn it from? From Yishmael. Because the angels say Ishmael was dying. So the angels say, God, let him die. Let this child die. Because if he lives, his offspring are going to give the Jewish people a hard time. So God said, okay, I'd love to do it. I have one question. One question. Is he guilty right now? So he asked the angels, is he guilty? No. He's not guilty. He's guilty. Right? Sorry, he's not guilty. Since he's not guilty, can't kill him. No possible way to kill him. Okay? So there's nothing to do. Right? So even if so if that's the case, it's only about what the person does now. Right? It's not about what they will do in the future. If a person would have known, Hitler Yamash Shemoy V'zichro as a child, right, as an infant, and they knew what he was going to do, they said, of course you kill him. Be a big mitzvah to kill him. You're going to save mass genocide. You're going to save 6 million people's lives, more. But what's the obvious answer? You can't do that. Because at that point in time, he's not guilty. You're not guilty. Right? It's ironic. We learn it out of Yishmael, but that's a saving grace because person's going to get judged where they're holding right now. But then someone's going to ask me the $2 million question because I just upped the ante, and that is nobody knows what their potential is. So how could you ever rest on your laurels? How could you not try to be better every day? Because you know what your potential is. You can't be happy just being mediocre, right? As we always say. Go into a job interview and say, yeah, what are you good at? Nothing. I'm just mediocre. I'm mediocre in this. I'm mediocre in that. Good luck. You won't get a job. You absolutely won't get a job. Right? So, yeah, there's a lot of negative things going on. Tremendous amount of negative things going on in the Jewish people. A lot of positives. It's unfortunate that, you needed a war. What happened to bring a lot of the Jewish people together? But essentially that's what happened. Like I heard somebody say, again, without getting into politics, it said once all was done, it's not going to be for a while, but once everything's said and done, they'll be back to protesting, which they've already done. Right? It said first day, not a week. I originally said I'll give it a week. Person said no. That day when it's all said and done, they're going to be out protesting straight away. We got to take something here. We're going to learn the lesson here. Right? These are hard lessons. Right? These are hard lessons. Like somebody points out, trying to learn to be more helpful, right? We ourselves have to be better. It's not about what other people do. Secular people, God will deal with them. However, he's going to deal with them. Right? But the people that are closest to him, they're going to pay the price. Because they know better. Right? This is the hard part. If they know better, then they have to act better. They have to work harder. Right? There's no question. Otherwise, God's going to say, like, what's the point of keeping my Torah if you're going to act like this or you're going to act like that? True. Because of the whole discussion, mentioned this last night, Pirkei Avos, the whole discussion, 2.5 years, difference of opinion between Hillel and Shammai whether man should have been created. They came to the conclusion it was better man should be created. But if man's going to be created, they have to look into their actions. Right? Some wanted to claim, like God made a mistake making man. But that was the conclusion. The better man should have been created. But didn't God know? Like, if God knows man's not going to keep the Torah the way they should, why'd God give him the Torah in the first place? But God doesn't make mistakes, right? Let's make clear. God does not make mistakes. He understood. He understood man could fall all the way down to the ground. But man could elevate themselves and be almost like angels. Almost. They can raise themselves to very high spiritual level. But isn't it true through their actions, God destroys his own house? Destroys the base on mikdash based on our actions? Yes. We're still in exile because of our actions. Yes. Doesn't God understand that? Sure. But he doesn't make mistakes. There was no being in the world, before man came on the scene that had free will. Plants don't have free will. Animals program DNA. Even if they choose to eat, not to eat, the program. Man's the only one that God breathed in the spirit of life, gave them a ruach mamalo, the Aramaic translation says. Gave them the ability to speak, the reason to make decisions. So based on that, we're the only ones that are similar to God in that sense. Right? In a very small sense. But, in that sense, we make decisions. Good decisions, bad decisions. Essentially, we make decisions. Animals don't make decisions. Instinct. Plants, trees, they don't make decisions. They go according to what nature does. That's it. So we're held, obviously, to a much higher standard. But if we overcome the evil inclinations, always a fight between the evil inclination, good inclination, good. If you go according to the evil inclination, you debase the body, you debase the soul. If I go according to my good inclination, I elevate the body and elevate the soul. It's very different. Right? There's a lot of room to grow, but a lot of room to fall. A lot of room to fall as well. So there's really nothing in between. Either, spiritually speaking, either you're going up or you're going down. Person should never, ever, ever say, I'm good. Everything's good. I'm good. What do you mean you're good? Either doing the right thing, you're trying to go in the right way, or you're not. Right? Nothing in between. I'm not happy being mediocre. Right? Forget it. Either you're growing, and you have different trials or not. Right? That's really the bottom line. Right? That's really the bottom line over here. Right? So we have to be better. Now, do we expect the secular people to be better? No. We're going to try and influence them. Try and bring them back. Okay. Right? That's our obligation. Good. But when they do things, does God get upset? Sure. But what they do and what we do is very different. We, the ones that are guarding the Torah and keeping the Torah, we got a much, much greater obligation. Much greater obligation. I hear from non-Jews all the time, wow, it's such a merit to be a Jew. It's an unbelievable thing. It's a huge responsibility. I always say, I wish Jews would say that. I wish Jews would say it's an awesome responsibility. So we're our own worst enemy. We got to work hard. life is hard. Okay. But we have to be better. We're the ones that are held to a higher standard. Now, even though there's collective punishment, that's true. And all Jews get blamed, right? You never hear of an Italian in Brooklyn does something wrong and say, burn down Italy, no more cannolis. No, you never hear that. A Jew does something wrong, whether religious or not, all Jews get blamed. Right? As the Gemara says, all Jews are interrelated, whether we like it or not. We're interrelated. So if any Jew does something wrong, the Jewish people pay the price. If an Orthodox Jew does something wrong, it's worse, 10 times worse. I remember I was at a Jewish outreach convention when I was back in the States. And so there was a panel discussion. What do you do if you see an Orthodox Jew got caught of a crime you see in the newspaper? All right, so I was there as part of a panel discussion. 3 other rabbis basically all came to the same conclusion, right? You condemn the act, not the person. Right? That was the conclusion. So I'll give anyone advice anytime, if you go somewhere to speak or you're asked to speak somewhere, right? Always better, try and speak first or at the beginning so no one else takes whatever you're going to say. So I had the envious position. I think I spoke third. I didn't speak last. I think I spoke third. And as I'm listening to what's being said, basically 2 people spoke in front of me, basically took almost every last thing I was going to say. So I'm like scrambling, trying to think okay, well, now what am I going to add over here? What am I going to say? So I get up to speak, an unbelievable siyata shmaya, heavily helped. So I said, there's a newspaper article, not if anyone reads newspapers anymore, right, or where they should, but let's say there was a newspaper article out there, or it's all over the internet, and the article says, dog bites man. If the article says dog bites man, who's going to read it? Nobody. Not so interesting. If you have a headline that says man bites dog, oh, that's a story. You don't see men biting dogs, right? Or women biting dogs in general, right? Meaning that if it's something that's not so common, even though we do hear of stories, Orthodox Jews doing terrible things or whatever. Okay, compared to the regular populace, it's certainly not comparable. But even so, right? Even so, it's not common, right? It's not very common. So when it happens, and this person's supposed to be a man of God, and that's what they're supposed to do, and blah blah blah. If they got caught doing something, that makes headlines. I remember I got into trouble. I'm sure people can't imagine this, but I got in trouble once. I was on commenting on someone's blog or whatever, and there was somebody that got caught money laundering. And one thing I had said, like one of the only things I said, is I was very happy the person admitted he was wrong. That's all I said. Because most people don't admit they're wrong. Even when they get caught, they don't have any remorse, any regret, nothing. Right? A lot of times. So I wrote, I was very happy to see this person admitted he was wrong. Did I get slaughtered? Slaughtered. You're saying it's okay. You're saying this. You're saying that. We want you to justify what he said. So you want me to justify? I'm not going to justify what he said. So I'm gonna make everyone even more upset. I'm like, that person has to answer for himself. I'm not gonna. So they boxed me in a corner and they said, we want you to explain to us. If you think it's so good, he admitted what he did was wrong. You tell us why he did it. So I did the most obvious thing. I answered the question with the question. I'm not going to answer that. Because I'm not going to answer why someone did it. Like someone once told me, secular Jew says, I saw an Orthodox Jew in a casino. I said, okay. They said, what were they doing there? I said, gambling. probably having a great time. They're like, no, according to your religion. So I love how secular Jews say that. According to your religion, is that forbidden? I said, yes. So they said, why were they doing it? I said, I don't have to answer for them. I'm going to have a hard enough time answering for myself after 120 years. I said, why do people smoke? Why are people overweight? I have to answer that? Why in the world do I have to answer that? I don't have to answer that. They have to answer for themselves. Why they did this or why they did that. Again, is it forbidden to go to a casino? Yes. They have a Yitzhar, they have an evil inclination to go to a casino. Okay. And who knows what else, is going on over there. I have to answer? I have to answer for why they did it? Yeah, it's called an evil inclination. They like to gamble. People like to smoke, even though it's bad for them. Tell me smoking's different. It's nicotine's addictive. Okay. But people have bad behavior. Why? Because they do it. Here's negative behavior. Okay. Their choice. I have to answer for someone else. So this writer of the blog, I was like furious. I'm like, I'm not answering for them. Because I'm not going to answer for this guy. All I said was I'm happy he admitted what he did was wrong. Now, could I give my spin why the person did it? Yes. They want to pay taxes. Right? They have money coming through different ways. This, that, didn't want to pay taxes. It's very simple. I'm not sure that's the only reason. There have been other reasons. There have been many other reasons. I'm not gonna answer that. I give my spin just like anyone else could. And who says what I'm saying is any more right? But I'm not gonna answer for somebody. That's the point. All I said was I'm happy the person admitted he made a mistake. Because there are other people, they don't even admit they made a mistake. They're just upset they got caught. A lot of people like that. They don't have remorse, they don't have regret, nothing. They feel bad. They feel bad they got caught. Oh, they ruined people's lives, other things. Doesn't matter. They're like ice in their veins. They don't care. It's all about them. It's just they got caught. Right? That's what happened. That's what happened. So 100%, we have to be better. You could ask the question, what about the fact they have churches here, other things here, right, in Israel? Okay. Yeah, like that's pretty bad. I agree. But at the end of the day, guess what? You're gonna have a claim against them? What do they know? Okay, they can read Hebrew. Very good. They don't know nothing about nothing. Zero about Torah. And it's very funny. I shouldn't say funny, right? It's very, it's very ironic. Sometimes you'll hear, let's say a secular member of Knesset will say something about Torah. Like make a claim. It's like, well, why can't ultra-Orthodox Jews work? The Rambam was a doctor. This person did whatever it was. Take like, a Torah giant, years ago, say, see, he did something. Why can't you do something? Like, and the ultra-Orthodox people in the Knesset flatten this person like a pancake. Like, you want to talk about this, that, and the other thing? Fine. We'll talk about Torah. We're not going to listen to you. We're not going to listen to you because you don't know nothing. You know absolutely zero. They flatten this person like a pancake. Flatten him like a pancake. Yeah. Boy, you guys getting so upset. We want to talk about something you know about good. Right? Speak about as much as you want. Talk about math, science, this, that. You want to be, a big expert in it? Great. You want to speak about Torah that you don't know anything about? Keep your mouth shut. You don't know nothing. Nothing. You got a chutzpah to open your mouth and say, this is what Torah is. This is what the prophets are. This is, So again, we're our own worst enemy. Right? We're going to get blamed. We're going to get blamed as we should because we're holding a different standard. Right? We're held to a different standard than everybody else. Right? There's no question. So if we're held to a different standard, it's a totally different thing. Totally different thing. Someone's a potato farmer in Idaho, doesn't matter. Someone asks, okay, no-height question. When a no-height is public environment, stadium, football field, whatever, where women are not modestly dressed. Okay. in our walking around, is Noahide allowed to open a book of Psalms? If a woman is not dressed modestly, right, is she allowed to be near a book of Psalms? I mean, yeah, I'll say it like this: for a Jew, we'll talk about Jews for a second. For a Jew, it's a much bigger question because Jews have laws of modesty. Women, women, have to dress a certain way. Men should dress a certain way, no question, right? As well, but for women, if a woman, let's say a person has, bookcases of holy books. A woman walks in pajamas, or even with less clothing on. For a Jew, she can't do that. That's forbidden, 100%. Even for a guy, walk around, with holy books, in their underwear. We'll keep this clean. That's forbidden, 100% forbidden. That's a disgrace to the Torah, disgrace to these holy books. Right now, we want to talk about a non-Jew. Non-Jew might be a different issue. Why? Right now, it's not good for them to be dressed that way in front of holy books. That's for sure. That would be for sure. But the question is, do non-Jews have any halachas of modesty? Are there any laws of modesty by non-Jews, by Noah? I would normally say, as a moral imperative, they should walk around with more clothes on. Doesn't mean women have to wear pants, whatever, but they should be, they should be covered. Right? If they're not covered, then, if a person's only looking in the book of Psalms, they're not looking at this woman or whatever, that's all right. If the woman come near the book of Psalms, I would put the book away. I would definitely put the book. Yeah, if she would come near the book of Psalms, then you put it away. Then you cover it up because that's a disgrace. Right? That's a disgrace. Now, even though we said, you're gonna say it's contradiction because even though we said, a Noahide woman, she doesn't really have to dress modestly. She should, right? She definitely should for herself, but she doesn't have an obligation according to Noahide laws, per se. I would say it's a moral imperative, but she doesn't have an obligation. But if she comes near dressed that way, and there are holy books around, she shouldn't. Now, if you're going to say, why have these holy books go away? I think that's going to be a problem, right? Because it's better to cover them up so, that doesn't become an issue. But you're still allowed to read the book of Psalms, even, even there. As long as you got your face in the book of Psalms, they're not looking at anything else, and then that should be all right. Right? That should be all right. But if she comes too close, I would close the book and cover it. Right? Put it in your pocket or whatever. But so there is, even if she doesn't have, let's say, an obligation of modesty, she does have an obligation. There's an obligation that the book should be treated properly, should be given proper respect. Even if she herself technically doesn't have an obligation to dress modestly, nonetheless, the way she dresses, right, she shouldn't dress a certain way if there are books around. So in other words, a person's not going to, tell this person, put on other clothing or this and that. So you got to cover up the book, right? So you got to cover up the book so the book doesn't get disgraced, right? That is what I would say. Someone asked, very good. Yaakov had 2 sisters as wives, right? That's why he gets punished. Definitely why he gets punished. Right? When he comes into the land, Rachel dies. But guess what? I'm going to tell you a secret. Before the Torah was given, was that permissible? Permissible. You can marry 2 women. You can marry 2 sisters. You're going to tell me Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept the Torah before it was given? Okay. Yeah. So he's held to a higher standard. Good. So the whole question, why he's allowed to do it? But guess what? He also saw that he got tricked. He got tricked by Lavan. So instead of being married originally to Rachel, he's married to Leah. Very good. Yeah. So the Gemara says, if you had intention to marry the wrong person, you thought it was one person with someone else, can't be married to them. The Gemara itself says that's forbidden. Right? So Rabbi answers, how can that be? So how could he stay married? Because he understood. 12 tribes supposed to come out of her as well. So he's allowed to be with her. So that doesn't negate the problem. Right? That's not an issue. Now, how can he marry? So he can say outside of Israel, didn't apply, he didn't live in Israel. Right? At that point, he didn't live in Israel. So Torah only applied when they were going to go to Israel. Very good. Problem is, once they got to the land of Israel, Rachel dies. Rachel dies. Now, doesn't King Solomon say, no one's been in this world that hasn't sinned? Right? Brings down in Ecclesiastes. Nobody has been in this world that hasn't sinned. The Gemara says the 4 people didn't sin. 4 people died only because of the sin of Adam and Eve, of eating from the tree. Very good. Yeah. So if people sin, does that mean they don't keep Torah? There's repentance. Remember, there's repentance. A person may have to die. Maybe the punishment is the person has to die also, right? Or, they'll die quicker or they'll die younger, whatever the case is. That doesn't mean he didn't keep the rest of the Torah, right? You see, people sin. Even the greatest of people sin. So you want to make the claim, which is ludicrous, but you want to make the claim, no, he didn't keep Torah. What do you mean he didn't keep Torah? He didn't keep anything else, right? He kept no Torah at all. None. You transgress one thing, you throw the whole thing out. You see that's not true. You see that's not true. See, even by non-Jews, right? But you see this repentance, right? You see, you read the book of Jonah, you see this repentance even by non-Jews. Nineveh were not Jews. So you see, even non-Jews have the right. You say, oh, but they don't have an obligation to keep Torah. Okay, but they're liable for death penalty. God was going to wipe them all out. See, if you want to say that patriarchs and King David and whoever else, all great people sinned, okay. Yeah, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Judaism does not claim perfection. They're human beings. Human beings can make mistakes. They're great human beings. Yeah, they can make, minor mistakes that could cause serious problems. That's true. But you're making an assumption, a very big assumption, a wrong assumption. And that is, the assumption is that because they sinned, even the patriarchs, means they didn't keep Torah. That's a wrong assumption. Make a mistake? Everybody makes mistakes. Yeah, it's made clear everybody makes mistakes. So if everybody makes mistakes, right? Moses himself made one tiny mistake. We don't even understand the mistake that he spoke to the rock. Instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. Didn't water come out when he hit the rock? Yeah, but God said he didn't sanctify my name, so he wasn't allowed to go into the land. Okay? Very hard to understand. We're not going to go there, but it's very hard to understand. Now, God says, Moses, my trusted servant. Moses, my trusted servant. And God says, you're going to pass down the Torah, right? You're going to pass down the Torah to your people, right? To my people. You're going to be my spokesman. Very good. Now, God said he didn't sanctify his name, right? Let's make it real clear. God said you didn't sanctify my name. You and Aaron didn't sanctify my name. Now, at Moses' level, that's a huge mistake. At his level, for us, we can't understand. Doesn't make any logical sense. Okay, water still came out from it. So even if water came out from it, you want to tell me that was desecration of God's name. Very hard to understand. But God says you didn't sanctify my name, whatever that means, right? You didn't sanctify my name. Okay. Now you want to say Torah came through Moses, right? The Torah says also clear in the book of Deuteronomy, you can't go against what Moses says. That knocks out the Christians, knocks out the Muslims, knocks out everybody. Now, even if that's true, does the Torah ever make any claim that a human being is perfect? Torah never makes such a claim. Moses is the greatest of everybody. Anyone ever created, Moses the greatest. That there's no question. Right? God says there's never going to be anyone greater than him. Nobody. Now, did God say Moses is perfect? Doesn't say he was perfect. Right? So you want to say he made some sort of minor mistake no one understands. No one really understands. Okay. Now, does anyone want to make the claim? Now, all Torah is based on what Moses passed down. So if we're going to say, and Moses is where did he get all his information from? He got it from God, right? He got it from God. But where did the Jewish people come from? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Jewish people came through Jacob. Essentially came through Jacob. And Moses made them into a nation when they got to Mount, or God made them into a nation, right? When they came to Mount Sinai. Now, logically speaking, if that is true, and even if Moses made a mistake, isn't he the leader? He's the leader. Doesn't God say in front of 3 million people, you don't mess with Moses? He's my trusted servant. Whatever he says, you do. Right. Now, did Moses make a mistake? Yes. At some level. So God says, okay, you're not going to be the leader anymore. Who am I going to give it to? I'm going to give it to Yeshua. I'm going to give it to Joshua. Very good. Now, does that mean he didn't keep Torah? Does that mean Torah doesn't get passed through him? That doesn't mean that. It just means he's not perfect. That's all it means. Right? And at whatever level he sinned. Okay. Everybody sins. Right? So you want to say no one in the world ever kept Torah? That's ludicrous. That's ludicrous. Right? People make mistakes. We're doing the best we can. They were much greater than we'll ever be in 10 lifetimes. Doesn't mean it's not true. And doesn't mean they don't pass it down. Right? That's not what it means. Right? You're right. He didn't go into the promised land. Very good. But the Torah comes through him. And even if he didn't enter the land, guess what? God said you don't go against him. Right? That's why in Jeremiah chapter 30, it says a new covenant. How can it be a new covenant logically? Ask the question. How can it be a new covenant? It can't be. Why? Because you can't go against what Moshe said. So if you go according to the beginning of the chapter, it's talking about about going back to the old covenant. Very good. That the Jewish people weren't keeping. So why is it called the new covenant? Very good. Right? Legitimate question. But you can't go against the old covenant. You can't go against what Moshe said. You're right, Moshe didn't lead him in the land, but he gave him the Torah. That doesn't change. Nothing about that changed. So for him, it was a huge mistake. Okay. So what? He didn't go into the land. That means the Torah is not true. That means it doesn't get passed down. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. He passed it down. Right? He gave it to Joshua. Joshua passed down to everyone else. He taught everyone in the desert. Okay. He didn't get a chance to go in the land. Good. Other reasons why he didn't go into the land. Doesn't matter. He didn't go into the land. So what? That doesn't change anything. Doesn't make the Torah not true. It doesn't mean people don't make mistakes. Doesn't mean that. Even Moses at his level made some sort of mistake. Whatever that mistake is, very hard to understand. Doesn't matter. Right? Doesn't matter. Very good. Right? You want to say it's immature, lacking understanding? Why? Why? Anytime you find something false in a book, then that religion can't be true. If you find one thing in the Torah is not true, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Right? Torah wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Right? All you have to do is find a mistake. One, Christianity got plenty of mistakes. Islam got plenty of mistakes. Right? It's not immature. It's either the Torah, either the book's the true or not. Right? And you got false prophets. They're false prophets. Right? But you can't add or subtract to what Moses said. So how can any religion go against what Moses said? They're going to say, oh, JC lived, right? And he lived in, he doesn't have to keep the Torah and he can nullify the Torah and all this. Yeah, it's all convoluted. A lot of mistakes. In the book. That's not my job to prove it. Go to Rabbi Singer's website and prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt. But that's not the point. Right? The point is the Torah itself says you can't go against Moses. You can't go against what Moses said to the Jewish people. Anyone who goes against that's a false prophet, it's a false religion. You want to call that immature? All right. You can call it immature, you call what you want. It doesn't really matter, but everything else is false. Everything else is false. Yeah, I don't think that's too hard to understand. Let me see. All right, what else you got for me? Edom said they never written Torah, so they followed the Torah. They kept the Torah, whatever the Torah was before the Torah was given. Torah wasn't written down until much later. There was a written Torah as an oral Torah, right? There are certain things that they did. Abraham, gave morning sacrifice as way of prayer from in the morning. Afternoon was Yitzchak. Yaakov was at night, right? Other things that they did doesn't mean they didn't keep Torah, right? They didn't keep full Torah like we know it, like we understand it. So it's like, you got to understand what it means. It's like you're standing on one foot and says, "Oh, they kept the entire Torah before it's giving." You want to tell me what that means? According to any language, you want to tell me what that means? Right? You know. So so they understood things. They understood and kept whatever they kept. God didn't say, "Oh, you're doing this. Knock it out." I didn't tell you to do that. That's before Mount Sinai. Well, they kept things before Mount Sinai. Bris Milah, they kept before Mount Sinai, right? Circumcision. They need the sciatic nerve, kept that before Mount Sinai. Certain things in Shabbos they kept before Mount Sinai, before Torah was given. So what are you arguing about? There were mitzvahs that were given that the Torah says that they did before the Torah was given, before Mount Sinai. So that's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. Yeah, let me see. What else we got here? I went to Lavan. Yeah. And he left Lavan more like a man. Okay. And then Ace was the man who met and wrestled with him. No, it wasn't Aesop. It was his angel, archangel. It was an angel of Aesop. Yeah, but it wasn't Aesop himself. Right? It wasn't Aesop himself. Aesop busted Yaakov's hip. Okay, that's all he did. Yeah, but it was his angel. That's why he said, I saw God sort of face to face, and that's the only place he got hurt. Okay, so different reasons why I hit him in the hip. Whatever, without going into that. But so what? Again, what does that prove? Well, it doesn't show anything. It doesn't prove anything. We're not doing anything that Aesop said. So kind of irrelevant, right? That's kind of relevant. Also, Yaakov gave the blessing to Ephraim, gave to both. He gave to Ephraim and Menashe. Just Ephraim was greater, right? He saw there was he had greater people coming out of him than Menashe. So that's one reason, right? Other reasons why even though Ephraim was the younger one, he gave him the blessing. Okay, so what's relevant, right? Who said it's supposed to be Mashiach of Ephraim? The Mashiach, Mashiach of Yosef, right? Again, the tribe of Yosef is just one, is Ephraim and Menashe together. Very good. Yeah, but where did he get his strength from? Where does Ephraim come from? It comes from Yosef, right? So why would you have a Mashiach of Ephraim? That wouldn't make any sense, right? It's going to come from his father, not from him, right? So certainly not from him. You say, guard and keep the Torah, you're a Kohen. I don't have to be a Kohen. Why do I have to be a Kohen? They're the ones who taught Torah, right? Right? The Torah says you got a Kohen and Levites. You got to listen to whatever they say in every generation. So who are the Kohen and Levites in every generation? The rabbis. So you got to listen to what the rabbis say. I don't have to be a Kohen. It's irrelevant if you're a Kohen or not. Kohanim today, what do Kohanim today do? What do they do? The only thing Kohanim today do is, in Israel, they bless the congregation every day. They get called up to the Torah first. That's about it. I mean, if certain things with Truma Meiser, right, taking tithes from the food, right, certain things apply to Kohanim and Levites today, right, for sure, only in the land of Israel. But for the most part, Kohanim do not, have, there are certain people that they can marry, right, or they can't marry. So that, that's still in effect. But most other things, when it comes to Kohanim and their separation from the rest of the Jewish people, doesn't apply, right? They can't, another thing, they can't come in contact with dead body, right? They're not allowed to come in contact with a dead body, even though everyone's impure today. But they have an extra level of holiness that not everyone else has. So they have that level of holiness, so they have to be more careful, right? Not to come in contact with a dead body. So even I'm not a Kohen, Kohanim was supposed to keep the Torah. The entire Jewish people. You think when God says When God says that, the Ten Commandments, you think he's only talking to the Kohanim? Who's he talking to? He was talking to 3 million people. He's talking to the entire nation. It's not just the Kohanim who have to keep the Torah. Everyone has to keep the Torah, right? Everyone has to keep the Torah, right? What happened to that Torah? I'm not going to bother. That I already answered that. You don't wear tchelis, right? I bet you wash your hands like a priest. Wash your hands for the b'nai. No. When's the only time you wash your hands? When you get up in the morning, after you come out of the bathroom, and when you wash for bread. That's it. Those are the only times you wash your hands. Or you touch a place in your body that wasn't covered. That's the only time. Right? That's the only time. Again, we mentioned this thing by the blue string. Not everyone agrees that the blue string is the right one. So since we don't have a tradition on it, we don't do it. That I already mentioned. So that has nothing to do with being a Kohen. Keeping the Torah has nothing to do with being a Kohen. Right? If it's only given to the Kohanim, that's not what the Torah says. Read it. The Torah says it's given to everybody. It's given to the entire Jewish people. Right? So it's given to the Jewish people. Okay, the Kohanim had different obligations than the rest of the people. Good. They had different obligations because God singled them out. Okay, right? That means no one else keeps Torah. No one else has an obligation except the Kohanim. Also kind of silly, right? God didn't just give the Torah to the Kohanim. Read the verse. He gave it to everybody, right? He stood in front of the entire nation. It doesn't say he stood in front of the Kohanim, right? Go look at Exodus chapter 20. It doesn't say that, right? It says clear. He stood in front of the entire nation. The entire nation, right? The entire nation heard it. So the Thai nation heard it. What are you singling out Kohanim for? They had a higher role to play. True, that is true, right? They had a higher role. They had a higher role to play, right? They definitely had a higher role to play. Okay, right. So even if that's true, that they had a even if they had a higher role, to play, okay. But the Torah is given to everybody, right? That's clear in the verses, right? You got to go back and read the verses on that. Let me see. Any other questions here? Let's see. Washing hands was meant for the Kohen in the temple. Okay. Yeah, but there was also impurity, right? Impurity laws. There were impurity laws that person had an obligation. They had an obligation to what? Wash their hands, not just the Kohanim. Right? Not just the Kohanim. There were certain things for Kohanim, I agree. But it's not everything. Right? You're making it sound like it's only if it's for everything. Right? Only God can wash hands. Not true. Right? It's definitely not true. Thor says, don't poop in the camp. Yeah, he doesn't want to smell the poop. Yeah, so. Is it kosher to be pooping in Jerusalem? Why? What's the problem? Why would that be a problem? Yeah. I'm talking about in the temple. Yeah. If you're talking about in the temple in Jerusalem, it's not a problem. Wouldn't be an issue. Wouldn't be an issue. But again, who got the Torah, right? Let's make clear. Who got the Torah? Moses got the Torah. Moses passed it down. And the God singled out the Kohanim afterwards. Very good. But who originally taught the Torah? Moses. He passed it down, right? Gave it to a lot of other people, passed it down, whatever. And the Kohanim were the teachers. Good. But Moses is the original teacher, so doesn't prove anything. Yeah. Any other questions? How early should we get up to pray? Really got until midday to pray, but I would say it's better, to pray earlier than not. Definitely better to pray earlier than not, is what I would say. So, if you could pray before, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, that's probably good. If not, you could pray later, right? It's better to pray earlier than not, even for women if they can. right? So doesn't mean you have to pray when the sun comes up. No, but 8:30, 9 is a good time. A person gets up later, fine, right? Men, it's different. They got more obligation. But for a woman, she prays. Definitely pray before noontime. That's what I would say. And the best time to do the bedtime shema is when you go to sleep, right before you go to sleep, right? Right. That should be done right before you go to sleep. No question about that. And that means right before you go to sleep. What happens if a person can't sleep and they said it? Okay, but you should definitely say it right before you're going to go to sleep. Yeah. So the Kohanim lost it. How'd they lose it? They lost it. They don't have, it's a whole different thing today. What Kohanim are and what they do. We don't have a temple today, so a lot of things they lost. But it wasn't because of things they necessarily did. There's different circumstance. Yeah. Any other question? One second. Let's see one other thing here. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Israel time. Sorry, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on Torah portion of the week. Q&As, ethics of our fathers. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com, whichever good. Beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, and everyone have a great